The year 2025 changed everything. Massive tombs started appearing all over the planet, bringing myths and legends to life. High above the ancient structures, Seo Joo-Heon stands on a cliff edge, looking down at the world he's about to dominate. Guards spot him immediately and start shouting for someone to grab him, but it's already too late. These relics have completely overturned world history. Joo-Heon just smirks. Every legend, folktale, and work of fiction has become a tangible power, and he's the one who knows how to use them. He leaps into the air with blue energy trailing behind him, making a clean getaway as soldiers chase him on motorcycles. The guards scream that he's escaping into the tombs. For most people, these artifacts have turned the world into a living hell. Joo-Heon reaches out with a glowing hand, activating a relic's power. A massive pile of boulders slams down, completely blocking the tomb entrance and leaving his pursuers in the dust. History has been rewritten because he ascended as the King of Relics. Known as the Majesty, Joo-Heon adjusts his hood and wonders what kind of loot is waiting for him inside this time. He steps into the darkness with a confident smile, genuinely looking forward to the raid. In a sleek modern skyscraper, the world's leaders are holding a global summit. The mood in the boardroom is tense. They're moving on to the next item on the agenda, Joo-Heon's blatant privatization of relics. The delegates are complaining that he shouldn't even be allowed in the tombs if he won't share the research. Julian Miller and Lee Seala sit through the lecture, looking exhausted by their boss's reputation. Julian just adjusts his glasses in silence. A messy-haired guardian tries to clarify things, insisting they've heard this all before. Ilya Volkov, the silver-haired guardian, takes a drink while Julian tries to claim the captain is just doing preliminary inspections. Ilya nearly spits out his drink when the delegates point out that Joo-Heon is actually just looting them blind. He quickly tries to pivot, saying it's a danger assessment. Seala puts a hand to her head, absolutely done with the excuses. The room is filled with the grumbling of frustrated officials. She can't believe he had the audacity to name his latest tomb, the Tomb Raider King's Lounge. Suddenly the main screen flickers to life, showing Joo-Heon's smug face. The entire summit is stunned. He yells at them for not answering their phones, admitting he had to hack the system just to get a hold of them. Seala reminds him that they're currently in the middle of a global summit. Joo-Heon just brushes it off like it's no big deal. He leans against the frame, telling them to keep up the good work. He's completely unfazed by the high-stakes meeting. Joo-Heon casually mentions he's thinking of changing his title from Tomb Raider King to Tomb Raider Emperor. It has a better ring to it. Julian snaps, shouting into the screen to ask where exactly he is looting right now, but Joo-Heon is already moving on. The screen goes black, leaving the Guardians in an awkward silence. The summit leader just sighs and rubs his temples. He gives up and tells everyone to just move on to the next agenda. Back in the tomb, Joo-Heon enters the final chamber, looking for the prize. He finds Isis's Poison Fang, a glowing SS-rank divine-grade relic. Blue energy swirls around the jagged blade. He holds the powerful weapon, but he's still not quite satisfied with what he found. A massive shadow with black wings descends from the ceiling. A deep voice asks what the problem is. The three-legged crow sits perched in the air, mocking him for being unenthusiastic about such a rare find. Joo-Heon looks around the massive tomb, admitting he was hopping for a chief god-grade relic this time. He's aiming for something on the level of the sun god Ra. The crow just scoffs at his insatiable greed. She stares at him, but Joo-Heon just smirks back, telling her it isn't just simple greed anymore. He looks over his shoulder, saying it's only natural for a parent to want to pass down the absolute best things to their child. Cut to the Grand Medical University Hospital, where life is about to change in a different way. A doctor points out a small gestational sac on an ultrasound image. Irene Holton holds the scan with wide, shimmering eyes. She's officially 5 weeks pregnant. Joo-Heon pulls her into a tight, joyful hug. She cries out his name over the moon with the news. He holds her close, a gentle smile on his face as he tells her how incredibly happy he is. At this moment, he has everything he ever wanted. Irene smiles warmly, resting her head against him as they savor the news. She's just as overwhelmed with happiness as he is. Joo-Heon is already getting ahead of himself, wondering if he can just use a relic to find out the baby's gender. Irene laughs, telling him he needs to be patient since they'll find out on their own in a few weeks. Back in his office, he can't stop staring at the ultrasound photo. To him, this tiny image is more fascinating than any ancient artifact he's ever looted. Julian Miller stands in the background, arms full of books and a look of pure irritation on his face. He tells Joo-Heon to snap out of it and at least pretend to work while he's stuck in the office. Joo-Heon complains that Julian is ruining the mood of a literal miracle. Julian doesn't care, pointing toward the massive piles of paperwork that are threatening to bury them. He slams a fresh stack of books down on the desk, telling the Majesty that they're drowning in work because he's always out raiding. He wants Joo-Heon to at least help classify these new book relics. Julian gives a final warning. Nobody is clocking out until every single one of those is finished. Joo-Heon just sighs, resigning himself to the boring task. As Julian walks away, Joo-Heon starts flipping through the documents. He mutters to himself that Julian's personality is getting worse by the day, probably because he's still single. He tosses aside a few official documents and low-grade relics, completely bored with the routine. His eyes catch on something different, a dark, ornate book with a strange red symbol. Something about it feels off compared to the other trash in the pile. The book suddenly glows with a malicious red light, and a pointed tail flickers out from between the pages. A message appears in a dark bubble. "Hello there." A thick, black shadow surges out of the book like a wave of ink. It tells Joo-Heon that meeting him is an absolute pleasure. The room transforms into a dark, starry void as the mysterious book relic floats before him. It addresses him formally as the 187,487th Majesty. The relic informs him that he's been granted the right to participate in the Majesty War. Joo-Heon isn't impressed, calling the whole thing absolute nonsense. Ignoring his complaints, the book's I-like symbol glows brighter as it demands he choose a policy direction. It presents three paths: obedience, massacre, or neglect. The first option, obedience, would turn humanity into a resource for the relics. The world would prosper, but humans would become nothing more than nourishment. The second is massacre, which gives him the authority to erase anything deemed unfavorable to build his own utopia. It's a direct ticket to a global bloodbath. The final path is neglect, maintaining the status quo but losing all relic protection. Humanity would be left to face every coming disaster entirely on its own. Joo-Heon stares at the glowing red frames, his expression darkening. He doesn't see a single good option in the bunch. He tells the book to shut up, suspecting this is all some elaborate trick. He isn't interested in playing along with its games. Joo-Heon stands his ground, stating that he's already proven his worth as a majesty. To him, any further fighting is just a waste of time. The book relic remains silent for a moment, its red eye fixed on him through the crimson light. It asks if he really wants to defer his choice. When Joo-Heon confirms, the book simply says it understands. As it begins to fade, the relic leaves him with a chilling warning. He is definitely going to regret this decision. The void disappears, leaving Joo-Heon back in the quiet office. Something feels different now. The air feels heavy, and dark energy drips like ink from the ceiling. He stares blankly at the stacks of paper, a genuine sense of unease settling in his gut. The encounter left him with a truly shitty feeling. Without a word, he gets up and starts heading for the door. Julian is shocked, yelling after him to ask where he's going before the work is finished. Joo-Heon doesn't even look back, telling Julian not to bother looking for him because he's going straight home. Julian just stands there, calling him a bastard in frustration. Night falls over his massive estate, Valhalla Palace. The building is quiet, but Joo-Heon's mind is far from calm. He sits cross-legged in a vast, white space, using a relic to enter a deep meditative state. He needs answers that the physical world can't give him. He opens his eyes within the vision, searching for something or someone in the emptiness. A small girl with short, dark hair and a yellow clip runs toward him through the void. She looks just like a younger version of Irene. She breaks into a wide, joyous grin and calls out to him, "Daddy," echoing through the white space. Joo-Heon is stunned, a surprised smile spreading across his face as he looks at her. He can't believe it's actually her. He drops to one knee, looking at his future daughter in awe. He jokes that pestering the childbirth relic for all those hours was totally worth it. She giggles and reaches out, her small hands grabbing his as she keeps calling him daddy. It's a moment of pure domestic peace. But the peaceful image starts to flicker. The girl's eyes well up with tears, and her form begins to glow with an unstable light. Joo-Heon jumps back as a violent red surge erupts between them. He has no idea what's happening to the vision. The little girl is terrified, clutching her chest as cracks of light spread across her body. She cries out, asking what she's supposed to do. She begs him to remember her, saying she has to be born so she can protect him. Joo-Heon reaches out in desperation, but he can't stop the dissolution. She looks at him one last time, her face wet with tears as she begs him not to forget her existence. She's terrified of vanishing forever. The vision reaches its limit and explodes in a blinding flash of light, throwing Joo-Heon backward as his future daughter disappears into the glare. Joo-Heon bolts upright in bed, gasping for air as cold sweat douses his skin. The terrifying image of his daughter's dissolution still lingers behind his eyes. Beside him, Irene is still deep in sleep, unaware of the nightmare. Joo-Heon clutches his forehead, his heart racing as he tries to make sense of what he just witnessed. They rush to the hospital immediately, demanding an emergency scan. The medical staff is taken aback by the sudden late-night request for an ultrasound. Irene lies on the examination table while the doctor prepares the machine. She notes that it's far too early for their scheduled appointment and asks if something is wrong. The doctor's professional facade cracks as she stares at the monitor in silence. She looks from the screen to her patients, her eyes wide with a growing sense of confusion. "How is this even possible?" the doctor stammers, her voice trembling. Joo-Heon stands by the bed, his expression hardening as he senses the shift in the room's atmosphere. Irene's breath hitches as she hears the doctor's impossible conclusion. The baby has completely disappeared from her womb. There is no trace left of the life they had just confirmed. The room is thick with disbelief as the doctor confirms it makes zero medical sense. Irene is frozen in shock, her hand over her mouth, while Joo-Heon stares at the empty scan with a grim, calculating gaze. Joo-Heon's eyes narrow as he realizes the magnitude of the situation. This isn't a natural occurrence, it's something far more bizarre and sinister. In his mind, he sees his daughter's face again, her eyes shimmering with tears as she begged for his help before vanishing into light. The mysterious book relic appears in a dark, starry void, its malevolent laughter echoing. It cruelly reminds him of its previous warning that he would come to regret his decision. Back in the hospital, Joo-Heon pulls a devastated Irene into a protective embrace. The medical staff is baffled. Physically, she is perfectly healthy, yet the child has vanished without a single trace. Joo-Heon's eyes burn with an intense blue light as he vows to find answers. He knows this is relic business, and he's through playing by human rules. Outside Valhalla Palace, he summons a specialized artifact. "Thread of Ilethia, come out," he commands, the air rippling with mana. The relic, a large spool of glowing thread, appears with an audible sigh. It complains that it's been summoned yet again, reminding Joo-Heon it doesn't have the power to determine a baby's gender. A status window identifies the thread of Ilethia as an A-rank treasure-grade relic. It's a consumable artifact from the goddess of childbirth that can sense a fetus's condition. Joo-Heon snaps at the relic, telling it he didn't call for gender. He needs a status report on his child. The relic hums, its annoyance replaced by surprise at his intensity. "Understood," the relic responds, spinning rapidly as it sends out glowing white threads into the ether. It begins a high-level target search to track the missing life force. The threads weave a complex, glowing pattern through the darkness. The relic reports with certainty, the child is still alive. A single, brilliant point of light marks the child's presence. However, the relic warns that she has been moved somewhere unreachable, existing in a state where she cannot be born into the world. "Moved where?" Joo-Heon roars, but the relic can only respond with uncertainty. It lacks the power to pinpoint a location beyond the fact that she's been displaced. The night city stretches out beyond the office windows, silent and indifferent to the king's brewing fury. Joo-Heon sits at his desk, his presence radiating a cold, lethal pressure. He demands an immediate restoration of his artifacts, giving the restorer a measly 10 seconds to start. Across the desk stands Kongaming, an exhausted man with messy brown hair and heavy dark circles under his eyes. He stares at Joo-Heon in disbelief, wondering what kind of madness he's spouting at this hour. Joo-Heon doesn't waste time, shoving the broken artifacts toward the restorer. Ilya Volkov, a calm, silver-haired man in a black shirt, watches from the shadows as Joo-Heon declares an emergency. Kongaming clutches his hair and screams in frustration. He rants about Joo-Heon's tendency to ditch events for tomb raiding, only to return and bury him in impossible workloads. Ilya interjects with his usual bluntness, stating that the captain's daughter has been kidnapped. The room goes quiet as the weight of the news hits the team. Joo-Heon drops a large orange pillow and a worn notebook onto the table, nearly crushing the restorer. He ignores Kongaming's confusion about how an unborn child can be kidnapped and orders him to begin. Kongaming looks at the strange pillow with its simplified yellow face. Joo-Heon identifies them as the pillow of Morpheus and the Wonera Critica mini notebook. Joo-Heon leans back, explaining that he searched the Greek relics for tools to interpret his dream, but they were all at 0 durability. He needs Kongaming to fix them so he can dive back in. Kongaming begrudgingly starts the restoration, his brush sparking with mana. Julian Miller, wearing his usual sweater vest and glasses, watches the process and asks about the relic's mechanics. An illustration of the winged god Morpheus appears. Legend says he delivers news by blowing dreams directly into the minds of the sleeping. Mana flows from Kongaming's brush into the pillow, lighting up ancient characters. Because of its divine origin, the pillow relic has the unique power to replay dreams its user has already experienced. Beside it, the Wonera Critica notebook rests, the interpretation of dreams. It's the final piece of the puzzle needed to translate the raw imagery into useful information. A depiction of the scholar Artemidorus is shown, the man credited with writing the oldest surviving book on dream interpretation in history. Ilya watches as Joo-Heon prepares to lie down. He asks if Julian is going to be the one using the notebook to interpret the king's subconscious. With a satisfied smirk, Kongaming announces that the restoration is complete. The notebook and pillow hum with a synchronized, golden light. Julian Miller takes the notebook, his face set in a serious, analytical expression. Beside him, Ilya and Irene wait with bated breath as the ritual begins. Joo-Heon drifts off as he rests his head on the pillow. Wisps of ethereal blue smoke begin to spiral out from his body, filling the room with the essence of his dream. Julian adjusts his glasses, focusing on the swirling dream energy. He prepares to decipher the fragmented memories before they fade. In the white void of the replayed dream, Joo-Heon sits beside the small girl. He looks at her with a gentle, protective smile, trying to comfort her. A close-up shows the child's small hand clutching his gold light crackling between them. She looks at him with desperate eyes and asks, "What do I do?" Within the dream, Joo-Heon's daughter cries out in despair, her eyes brimming with tears. She delivers a chilling message. The relics themselves have declared that she is not allowed to be born. The girl's form begins to dissolve into a violent vortex of blue mana and splintering fragments. Her final, echoing plea is for Joo-Heon to remember her existence as she is torn away from the vision. In the waking world, the mental strain becomes physical as Julian Miller's glasses shatter under the pressure of the dream extraction. He winces, clutching at his face as the link is violently severed. Joo-Heon sits up abruptly as the pillow of Morpheus erupts into flames beneath him. In the background, Kongaming screams in agony, lamenting that he had only just finished restoring the now charred artifact. Irene Holton rushes to Joo-Heon's side, her face pale with worry. She reaches out to check him for injuries, her voice frantic as she asks if he is all right after the explosive awakening. In a small Chibai-style aside, Irene continues to scold a bandaged Joo-Heon for his recklessness. He tries to dismiss her concerns, though he clearly feels the effects of the ordeal. Joo-Heon, now stabilized, looks toward Julian and asks for his professional opinion on the vision. He is certain now that this isn't just a dream, it's the deliberate work of the relics. Joo-Heon holds up the glowing Wonera Critica notebook, focusing on the fact that his future daughter explicitly identified the relics as the source of her predicament. The room is heavy with the weight of the revelation. Julian Miller looks up, his expression one of pure disbelief. He confirms that according to the dream interpretation relic, the artifacts have forbidden the child's birth. Julian wipes sweat from his brow, still processing the raw data from the notebook. He prepares to explain the underlying reason for the relic's drastic intervention. A glitching image of a family portrait appears, Joo-Heon, Irene, and their child, as Julian explains the terrifying logic. The unborn girl's potential power is so overwhelming that the relics have flagged her as a world-threatening danger. The daughter's image flickers and fades from the void. Julian notes that her very essence manifested as a dream so powerful it couldn't be contained by normal means. Julian holds his ruined glasses, the lenses spiderwebbed with cracks. He emphasizes that even S-rank relics were insufficient to withstand the sheer intensity of the dream energy. The pillow of Morpheus lies on the floor, reduced to a blackened, smoking husk. It is a stark reminder of the destructive power lingering within Joo-Heon's subconscious. Julian points his finger with conviction, concluding that the culprit behind this sabotage must be at least SS rank. The atmosphere in the room turns ice cold as the scale of their enemy becomes clear. Joo-Heon's face is a mask of suppressed rage as he considers the possibility of a divine-grade relic being involved. His eyes are sharp, calculating how to strike back at an enemy that can manipulate existence itself. The darkness behind Joo-Heon seems to writhe as the mysterious book relic manifests. It mocks his efforts, nodding with a smug tone that he failed to gain any truly useful information despite his struggle. Joo-Heon whips his head around, snarling a curse at the floating book. The relic merely drifts in the air, unfazed by his anger, seemingly enjoying the chaos it has helped orchestrate. A crimson sigil glows in the dark void as the relic speaks. It claims that these misfortunes are the direct result of Joo-Heon delaying a critical policy decision. 4 holographic panels appear, detailing the choices available to him: obedience, massacre, neglect, and negotiation. The relic offers him one final chance to choose a path for humanity's future. The negotiation option is highlighted, promising Joo-Heon a seat among the 12 executors who manage relics across world lines. It paints a picture of safety and prosperity for his family in exchange for his cooperation. Joo-Heon stares at the glowing options, his expression unreadable. He realizes the balance between these choices is fundamentally broken, designed to coerce him into a specific outcome. A close-up of Joo-Heon's eyes reveals a cold, piercing intelligence. He sees through the facade, wondering exactly what kind of trap these bastards are trying to lead him into. The mysterious book relic floats triumphantly, convinced it has finally cornered him. Joo-Heon states that he has reached a decision, his face hardening as he prepares to face the divine conspirators. Seo Joo-Heon doesn't hesitate for a second. He stares down the glowing options and chooses the bloodiest path available: massacre. The mysterious book relic practically jumps out of its skin, sweating as it tries to steer him toward negotiation instead. Joo-Heon just crosses his arms, telling it his nasty temper makes massacre the perfect fit. The book finally gives in and grants him the massacre buff. Red energy swirls around Joo-Heon's hand, promising him the power to erase anyone he wants. The book flips its pages eagerly, offering to give him a list of recommendations for his first targets. It seems almost too excited to get started. Joo-Heon gives it a cold, dead-eyed stare. His first targets aren't people. He's going after every single relic entity in existence. The book starts panicking, claiming that relics aren't valid targets for deletion. It insists he has to choose from humanity, but Joo-Heon isn't changing his mind. The book flies into a rage, calling his decision absolute blasphemy. It can't believe a majesty who's supposed to protect relics would ever suggest destroying them all. Joo-Heon bares his teeth in a snarl. These relics took his unborn daughter away, and he's not about to let that slide. His eyes glow with a terrifying intensity as he demands they bring her back right now. If they don't, he's ready to kill every last one of them. Realizing he can't be reasoned with, the book starts to back away. It scolds him for not making a wise choice when he had the chance. The negotiations are officially over. Since he refused to cooperate, the book declares that it's imposing the neglect state on him. Julian Miller and Kongaming stand nearby, looking confused as dark energy starts to fill the room. The book vanishes, leaving behind a warning that a disaster is about to strike. Joo-Heon's eyes snap open as he stands in the middle of his bedroom, his face twisted in a grimace. He's back in reality, but the weight of the book's threat is still hanging over him. He suddenly jumps up and lets out a string of curses, startling his teammates. Kongaming and Julian stare at him, wondering if he was even listening to their conversation. Julian asks if he's really zoning out at a time like this, but Joo-Heon just rubs his head in frustration. The transition back from the vision was jarring, to say the least. Irene Holton stands behind him, her face filled with concern as she asks what happened. Joo-Heon can only cover his face, unable to explain the madness he just experienced. He tries to process everything, but the situation is moving way too fast. He can't even tell if he's awake or still dreaming. The heavy door to the room slams open, cutting through the tension. Someone is shouting for the captain, and they sound desperate. Chloe Laurent bursts into the room, her hair a mess and her eyes wide with panic. She shouts that they have a massive problem on their hands. Joo-Heon looks up, his expression hardening as she explains that something strange is happening to the citizens outside. The disaster the book promised has already begun. Across the city, chaos erupts as relics manifest randomly in people's hands. Fires break out, and people scream as the sudden influx of power turns the streets into a war zone. In Joo-Heon's mind, the image of his daughter remains clear. This kidnapping of a child who hasn't even been born yet was just the spark for the coming catastrophe. The first strange phenomenon is that relics with no owners are suddenly appearing out of thin air. The world's skyscrapers loom over a society that's about to be flooded with dangerous artifacts. On a simple glass counter, a jagged stone relic suddenly crackles with blue electricity. The people nearby are terrified, having never seen the object before it just appeared in their pockets. A woman in a suit stares at the sparking stone in a man's hands, her face pale. He's panicking, wondering if this is some kind of terrorist attack or a relic that's going to make him sick. A man in a tank top shouts at someone to keep moving if they're done turning in their relics. The sheer volume of people trying to get rid of these dangerous objects is overwhelming. Inside the drop-off center, dozens of people hold up their newly acquired relics, shouting about how long they've been waiting. The line is backed up out the door as the staff struggles to handle the influx. The massive Guardian headquarters tower stands tall against the night sky. It's become the central hub for dealing with the global relic outbreak. Inside, wooden crates are being packed tight with the relics collected in just a single day. There's everything from scrolls and shields to golden goblets and candelabras. Joo-Heon stands over the crates with his arms crossed, listening as Julian Miller reports the findings. It's unheard of for relics to show up without even creating a tomb first. The situation gets even messier as people start using the artifacts for their own gain. A smartphone shows a video of someone heading to a casino, planning to use a jackpot relic to cheat. Ilya Volkov stands with Joo-Heon, watching as more crates are moved. He notes that the situation is even worse than it looks because they can't identify the relics at all. The team walks toward the Eye of Heaven, a massive green glowing device used for identification. It's supposed to have information on every relic in the world, making an unknown one impossible. They place a simple teapot relic under the scanner's light. Thin lines of energy wrap around the object as the system begins its analysis. The scan comes back with a failure message, unable to identify. Joo-Heon's expression darkens as he realizes these relics don't exist in the Eye of Heaven system. Chloe Laurent and Lee Seala come running into the lab, shouting that something else has happened. The look on their faces tells Joo-Heon that the bad news isn't over yet. Joo-Heon turns to them as they explain that events from the future are starting to happen much earlier than they should. Relics that weren't supposed to be excavated for months are appearing in museums today. Chloe reports that news about the deaths of several world leaders is already circulating. They're still trying to verify the reports, but the timeline is clearly falling apart. She adds one more chilling detail. According to the reports, the commander is scheduled to die on September 18th. Joo-Heon's annoyance turns into a cold sweat. He snaps back that the joke isn't funny, his face twitching with irritation. The weight of his own predicted death date is finally sinking in. Suddenly, a red alert flashes across the screens as the facility loses main power. Joo-Heon and Ilya look up as the emergency power kicks in, casting the room in a dim green light. Joo-Heon stands alone in the darkened lab, surrounded by monitors that show the world falling into chaos. He's the king of relics, but for the first time, the relics are the ones holding all the cards. Back at Guardian headquarters, Lee Seala and Chloe Laurent are on edge as the power suddenly cuts out. They both realize that the situation in the city is turning into a total disaster. Seo Joo-Heon grits his teeth, sweating as he feels the shift in the air. He can tell that whatever is coming is going to be massive. In the middle of the Colorado Plateau, the power plant Core V is glowing with an eerie energy. This is where the Zeus relic is housed, and it's starting to wake up. A giant bolt of lightning tears through the sky and slams into the plant. The impact is so powerful it shakes the entire region. The core facility explodes in a blinding white flash. Sparks fly everywhere as the divine power breaks free from its containment. A worker scrambles for the exit, screaming for everyone to run. He shouts that the Zeus relic is out of control and they need to evacuate immediately. A massive foot in a golden sandal stomps onto the ground with a thunderous boom. A voice calls the fleeing humans filthy and asks where they think they're going. Zeus himself fully manifests, a towering figure crackling with arcs of electricity. He bellows for the majesty to show himself. The god is fuming, his eyes glowing with an intense divine light. He's been waiting for this chance to finally make the man who humiliated him pay. Joo-Heon steps into the room, calm as can be, and asks if Zeus was looking for him. The god freezes, caught completely by surprise. Joo-Heon casually tells the terrified workers to clear the room. They don't need to be told twice and scramble away as fast as they can. He taunts the god, telling him he looks surprisingly good for someone who just broke out. It's clear he isn't intimidated by the SS rank relic at all. Joo-Heon reaches into a plastic bag and pulls out a blurred-out object. He mockingly asks Zeus if he'd like to have this back. The item is a divine rank relic that Joo-Heon previously cut right off the god's body. He dangles it like bait, saying he would have returned it if Zeus had just behaved himself. Zeus's face contorts with absolute fury at the reminder of his shame. He can barely contain his rage as he glares at the man holding his missing piece. He lunges at Joo-Heon with a roar, his hands glowing with lightning. He screams for the bastard to give it back and strikes out with all his divine power. Zeus throws a punch, but a sudden red energy flare erupts between them, blocking the hit. The impact sends shockwaves through the entire room. Joo-Heon's eyes widen in surprise as he realizes something is wrong. He wasn't expecting Zeus to be this fast. A direct hit from the god's fist sends Joo-Heon flying backward through the air. He grunts in pain as the force of the strike nearly knocks the wind out of him. He skids across the floor and realizes his authority isn't working like it should. He wonders why his powers are failing him at the worst possible moment. Zeus doesn't let up, closing the distance for another attack. Joo-Heon can't understand how the god managed to get free in the first place. Joo-Heon mocks him, saying he's not as tough as he expected. He's decided he's going to beat the hell out of the god regardless of his failing authority. He reaches for a new relic, his expression turning serious. He's ready to pull out the big guns to put Zeus back in his place. Joo-Heon holds up a frilly white wedding veil with a smug grin. He tells Zeus that he's got plenty of ways to win without relying on authority. He launches the relic forward, explaining that he spent his free time studying every artifact in existence. He knows exactly how to handle a god. Zeus is caught in the middle of his lunge as the white cloth wraps around him. He lets out a confused cry as the frills start to bind his body. Lace and pink roses sprout out of nowhere, winding themselves around the god's gloved hands. The relic is responding to Joo-Heon's command with perfect precision. The roses bloom as they bind Zeus's feet, pinning him to the spot. The divine energy he was crackling with starts to fizzle out under the frilly layers. Zeus is left standing in a complete wedding dress and holding a bouquet, looking absolutely ridiculous. He's horrified as he realizes his powers have been completely sealed. Joo-Heon explains that this is Hera's authority, an SS-rank relic. Since it belongs to Zeus's wife, it's designed to force anyone to keep their promises. He notes that if the target has betrayed their marriage or family, the relic's power jumps to 1,000%. It's the ultimate weapon against a notorious cheater like Zeus. Zeus is sweating buckets as Joo-Heon brings up his infamous track record. The god begs him to take the humiliating dress off, but Joo-Heon is just getting started. Joo-Heon smirks and tells him not to get excited yet. He's got one more relic from one of Zeus's wives to show him. He pulls out a golden crown known as Medes' wisdom. It's another SS-rank relic that's famous for being able to bring down a god. He tells the story of Medes, the goddess of wisdom and strategy who was Zeus's very first wife. She was one of the most powerful entities of her time. According to the myth, Zeus swallowed her whole to stop a prophecy about a son who would become stronger than him. It was a brutal way to keep his throne. But Medes was already pregnant and raised her child inside Zeus's body. Luckily for the god, the child turned out to be a daughter instead of a son. Eventually, Hephaestus had to split Zeus's head open because of a headache, and Athena emerged in full armor. She was the goddess of wisdom and war from the moment she was born. Zeus stares at the crown in horror, knowing exactly what kind of power it holds. He can't believe Joo-Heon has such a terrifying relic in his possession. The crown transforms into a heavy blue mechanical gauntlet on Joo-Heon's arm. He asks Zeus how he thinks a punch to the head will feel in this form. Joo-Heon delivers a brutal blow that sends shockwaves through the entire facility. He isn't holding back as he pummels the god's skull. He laughs as he hits him again, telling the bastard to try giving birth to a son through his head this time. Joo-Heon looks absolutely ruthless as he finishes the job. Zeus's single eye wide with terror as he sees the coming blow. He manages a frantic plea for Joo-Heon to wait, but it's already too late. Seo Joo-Heon doesn't hesitate for a second, slamming the Medes' gauntlet directly onto the god's head. The force of the divine strike sends blue shockwaves radiating through the air. Zeus is left dazed and broken, groaning in pain as he tries to recover his senses. His divine form is heavily bruised and battered from the impact. Joo-Heon scoffs that a single hit isn't nearly enough to satisfy him. He winds up for another massive punch, his gauntlet glowing with overwhelming energy as he brings it down again. He stands triumphant, a confident smirk on his face as blue energy petals swirl around him. The Medes relic has proven to be the perfect tool for administering punishment. The final blow sends Zeus plummeting back down into the center of a massive crater. His body glows with the remnants of the blue attack as the dust begins to settle. Joo-Heon stands over the pit, looking down at the fallen god with a look of pure boredom. He remarks that Zeus should have just stayed put and generated electricity instead of starting a rebellion. Joo-Heon turns to Cunning, restorer, an exhausted man with messy brown hair and dark circles under his eyes wearing a beige cardigan. He casually orders him to go and restore the mess he made. Cunning examines Zeus, who has reverted to a golden spear with a ghostly, beaten head floating above it. He grumbles about why Joo-Heon turned the Medes relic into a gauntlet for a beating instead of using it properly. Joo-Heon scratches his cheek with a look of complete indifference. He simply replies that he did it because he genuinely wanted to hit the god. Joo-Heon tells Cunning to stop talking back and just get to work. Cunning sighs about his difficult life, questioning why Joo-Heon always loses his temper so violently whenever he deals with Zeus. A top-down view shows the two men standing at the center of the massive, circular crater. Joo-Heon tells his companion to be quiet, while a faint voice from high above lets out a breath of surprise. High above the crater, Julian Miller watches the scene from a ledge, his glasses catching the moonlight. A slim man with light brown hair and a serious expression, he can't help but marvel at how ruthless Joo-Heon is. Julian's eye narrows behind his lens as he continues his observation. He seems to find the captain's display of power and destruction quite amusing. Seo Joo-Heon stands firm with his arms crossed, staring out over the ruin he created. To him, this complete dominance over the rebellious god is exactly how things should be. Zeus's little rebellion was finally put down, but things aren't exactly back to normal. There's still the mystery of why the power plant's security system didn't do its job. And even weirder, how did Zeus break his seal in the first place? Was it that weird book relic? Seo Joo-Heon is trying to focus on paperwork when a strange glitch catches his eye. A TV across the room suddenly flickers to life all on its own. The masked host starts broadcasting on every channel, talking about casualty statistics. It's a stage set up with a giant guillotine and a group of floating ancient figures. They're introduced as the Egyptian gods Set, Osiris, and Anubis, all SS-rank relics. Julian Miller bursts through the door, yelling that they've got a massive problem. He shoves his phone forward. Every single device is stuck on the same broadcast. Julian is panicked, explaining that the entire headquarters has been hijacked. It's as if someone hacked every electronic screen on the planet at the same time. Outside, crowds are gathering around public displays, watching the madness unfold in silence. The masked host leans into his microphone and asks if they should start judging the sinners. Osiris watches from above with a cold, unfeeling expression. The first target is a man bound under the blade, accused of a string of horrific murders. A studio audience wearing masks starts chanting for his head. The host declares the verdict immediately, guilty. The heavy blade drops with a thud, cutting off the man's muffled cries. Julian is absolutely horrified that they just watched an execution on live TV. But the show keeps going, bringing out another guy who lied to get extra food rations. The host asks the world if stealing supplies is worth the death penalty too. The blade drops again. Julian screams that these people have completely lost their minds. He asks Joo-Heon if they're really just going to sit back and let this happen. A sponsorship number scrolls across the bottom of the blood-stained screen. Joo-Heon realizes those aren't phone numbers, they're coordinates. He decides it's time to pay these judges a personal visit. He stomps his foot, cracking the floor as he activates a relic's power. The two of them are suddenly pulled into a void filled with glowing red eyes. They crash land right in the middle of the broadcast stage. They stand there, tiny under the massive shadow of the guillotine frame. Julian looks around at the swirling red energy, wondering what these monsters are. Joo-Heon reaches out his hand, summoning a surge of blue energy. He calls this whole execution show a pathetic little circus. He swings a massive glowing spear, shattering the machine into splinters. The crowd of spectators starts booing him for interrupting their judgment. The host doesn't miss a beat, declaring that they have a new target. He points right at Joo-Heon and screams the verdict, guilty. A massive beam of light fires down at him, but Joo-Heon doesn't even flinch. He catches the energy with one hand and starts crushing it like glass. He punches the floor, telling the gods it's time to put them on trial for a change. The jackal-headed gods look on in shock as their power is effortlessly shattered. Joo-Heon starts his own judgment with Osiris, mocking the god for running away from home. He delivers a crushing blow, declaring the god guilty just like the host did earlier. Next up is Set, who had the guts to turn on his own owner, another guilty verdict. He doesn't leave out Anubis either, calling him out for going along with the bullshit plan. The masked host just laughs it off, saying that simple attacks won't work against actual gods. He tells Joo-Heon to flail all he wants, but he won't be able to stop the executions. Joo-Heon pauses, feeling that something about these gods is definitely off. He realizes he can't hold back and needs to fight with the intent to completely crush them. He pulls out Isis's Poison Fang, an SS-rank relic he picked up during his last raid. Among her many titles, Isis is known as the goddess of magic and schemes. Legend says she once sent a snake to poison the sun god, Ra, to steal his power. She offered to cure his agony, but only if Ra revealed his true name to her. Anubis lunges at him, mocking the tiny knife Joo-Heon is holding. But Joo-Heon is just waiting for the right moment to strike with the glowing blade. As the fang connects, glowing red hieroglyphs start to burn onto the god's skin. Joo-Heon smirks, revealing the god's true name, Setek, the Chaotic One. He tells the god that his name can no longer exert any power in this place. Set collapses to the floor, his divine authority completely stripped away by the poison. Osiris is next, and Joo-Heon mocks him for having such an obvious, non-secretive name. He slices through the god's chest, letting the poison of the true name do its work. Finally, Anubis realizes he's in deep trouble as the glowing blade comes for his neck. Joo-Heon calls out his true name, Inpu, the ruler of the tombs, and finishes the job. He stands over the fallen gods, calling their grand show a total waste of time. Julian and Kongaming, Restorer, appear behind him as the dust starts to settle in the arena. The real Kongaming starts complaining, telling the captain he should have gone easy on them. But without a word, Joo-Heon suddenly turns around and slices his subordinate's head off. The host and his partner are completely stunned by the sudden, brutal move. Joo-Heon steps forward, calling out the person wearing his subordinate's face. The body on the floor starts to melt into a puddle of dark sludge, laughing as it dies. Joo-Heon isn't surprised. He knew exactly what kind of fake game they were playing. He looks around the stage, realizing that every single person there was a total illusion. Suddenly, a hand reaches out from a dark, melting portal on the floor of the arena. A voice praises Joo-Heon's experience for spotting the fakes so quickly. A man who looks exactly like Kongaming, but in a sharp suit, steps out of the shadows. Joo-Heon stares him down, asking why he's wearing his subordinate's shell. He can tell right away that this person doesn't have the same presence as the real Yeehaw. They stand off in the middle of the melting arena, eyes locked onto each other. The stranger admits he's not the Yeehaw Joo-Heon knows, but he's still impressed. He raises his hand to show off a glowing gold ring on his finger. Joo-Heon is shocked, demanding to know when the hell he managed to steal that. But the stranger just gives him a smug look, telling him he's got it wrong again. He tells Joo-Heon that he's not the only majesty in this world anymore. Joo-Heon stares intently at the newcomer, demanding to know his real identity. The man in the sharp brown suit and glasses remains calm, radiating a completely different aura than the man he resembles. In the background, the real Kongaming, Restorer, looks on in utter disbelief, flanked by Lee Seala and Julian Miller. Kongaming can't wrap his head around the fact that there's a literal doppelganger standing right in front of him. The stranger scoffs at Joo-Heon's bluntness, finding it quite impolite for a first meeting. He introduces himself as a majesty from another world line, one where he stood at the absolute pinnacle of power. Kongaming quickly points at Joo-Heon, reminding the stranger that they already have a king who leads them. The other majesty just smirks, mockingly calling Joo-Heon incompetent for being unaware of the impending ruin. He tosses a handful of artifacts onto the floor, Egyptian relics that Kongaming recognizes immediately. He claims he had to step in and secure them before they could break their seals and cause a disaster. Joo-Heon's expression hardens as he asks if the stranger was the one who unleashed Zeus as well. The stranger walks past him, claiming his actions were actually meant to prevent the relics from breaking free. He looks down at the city through the glass, nodding that the uncontrolled release of God-class relics would mean the end of this world. He seems genuinely impressed by how well-developed this world line is, with its abundance of relics and thriving humans. Joo-Heon follows him, demanding a clear explanation for all this talk about ruin. The stranger turns back, explaining that there are God-class relics currently on the loose, actively destroying entire worlds. As he speaks, a flash of golden light begins to emanate from the center of the room. From the light, June Majesty's cradle appears, a small boy floating in a brilliant SSS-grade aura. The other majesty stares in awe, having searched countless worlds for this legendary, one-of-a-kind treasure. June lands softly on his feet, standing between the two powerful majesties. The boy explains that his role has always been to protect the royal lineage of those who passed his trial. He looks at Joo-Heon and asks if he's ever heard the legend of the relic creator. Long ago, a first blacksmith stood up against divine entities that had begun to look down on humanity. He forged their very stories into tools that humans could wield, the first relics ever made. But as June continues his tale, he reveals that not all stories were willing to submit to this new order. Some rejected the form of relics entirely, shedding that existence to return to being pure stories. These rebellious entities chose to reign supreme over mankind once more, leaving a trail of death in their wake. The other majesty identifies these rebels specifically as certain gods, all of them god-class entities. He lists off the 4 ancient gods who led the charge: Ra, Enki, Vishnu, and Nuwa. Joo-Heon finally understands why the most massive mythologies never manifested as relics in his world. He recalls his own history of grave robbing, realizing why so many god-class relics were missing. Cunning and Julian listen in silence, realizing the scope of the threat they're actually facing. Joo-Heon notes that these gods weren't just absent, they were busy staging a rebellion in other dimensions. The other majesty nods in agreement, confirming Joo-Heon's suspicion. He explains that these gods don't just target one world, they hop through dimensions, subjugating or destroying everything in their path. Lee Seala and Ilya Volkov look at each other, the weight of the situation finally sinking in. Joo-Heon asks the one question that's been on his mind: did these gods destroy the stranger's world too? The stranger's eyes grow cold behind his glasses as he gives a simple, chilling answer: yes. The revelation leaves Seala, Ilya, and Cunning completely stunned. The scene shifts to the city skyline as a sudden, ominous vibration begins to shake the building. Inside the room, panic erupts as the floor begins to tilt, and Cunning falls to his knees. A close-up of the other majesty's face shows his glasses cracking as his eyes burn with an intense red light. A jagged, blood-red rift tears open in the fabric of reality, crackling with malevolent energy. From within a swirling void of darkness, a colossal, multi-layered eye stares down, its voice booming with contempt as it tracks the rat-like majesty to this world line. The entity declares that there is no escape, branding this entire world as the next target for its divine purification. Cursing the relentless pursuit of his enemies, the other majesty sprints up the stairs, while Joo-Heon demands to know if these are the ancient relics he warned about. Reacting quickly, Joo-Heon summons the majesty's library, Akashic Records, a SSS-grade treasure, and orders it to find the enemy's weaknesses. To his utter shock, the magical tome remains blank, unable to find any results on the entities threatening them. The massive eye looms over the city, its voice mocking their efforts since the entities do not technically exist within this world's logic. As the group flees through the building, the other majesty explains that Joo-Heon's library is useless against beings from outside this reality. Suddenly, a sinister relic, a dark book with a glowing red eye and a devilish tail, descends from the rift, mockingly greeting the other majesty by his designation. The mysterious book relic flutters open, its pages glowing with a crimson light as it prepares to unleash its first devastating curse upon the world. The other majesty frantically warns everyone that the 4 civilizations are using the book to systematically dismantle their world line. Joo-Heon can only watch in grim silence as the scale of the disaster begins to unfold before his eyes. Beside him, June, Majesty's cradle, tries to speak, but his words come out as a meaningless jumble of symbols and static. The book reveals its power through a glowing tarot card, the Tower, symbolizing a return to a primitive silence before the dawn of civilization. A system window flashes a dire warning. The curse of the Tower of Babel has been activated, severing all human communication on a global scale. Joo-Heon's heart sinks as he realizes the curse isn't just local. It has instantly blanketed the entire world. Across the globe, landmarks are surrounded by chaos as people realize they can no longer understand a single word spoken by those around them. From a rooftop, Joo-Heon surveys the silent, panicking city, knowing that this sudden loss of communication is a recipe for absolute catastrophe. In war zones across the planet, soldiers find their radios filled with garbled nonsense, leaving them blind and uncoordinated. The disaster strikes hospitals mid-surgery, where doctors and nurses are suddenly unable to give or receive life-saving instructions. Joo-Heon's mind races as he considers the most immediate dangers, realizing that airport control towers have also gone silent. Above the city, the lights of countless aircraft flicker in the darkening sky, now drifting aimlessly without guidance. Without communication, A massive commercial jet erupts in a horrific fireball midair, marking the start of a series of global disasters. Seeing the world descending into madness, Joo-Heon turns to Ilya Volkov and shouts a desperate command to stop time. Ilya Volkov tries to speak, but only absolute nonsense comes out of his mouth. A global alert flashes into existence. The blockade of language has officially begun. Seo Joo-Heon isn't sweating it since relics still work, and he's got the three-legged crow by his side. He summons Shakespeare's childhood pen, hoping a story can find a way around the lockdown. As Joo-Heon starts writing, Ilya pulls out a time-stopping relic from Solomon's collection of demons. The relic activates, sending a ripple through the air that begins to freeze the entire world. Ilya strains to keep the power under control as the very atmosphere begins to thicken. He calls upon the giant spirit Furkaz, who towers over the city with a celestial shield. The massive warrior looms large, holding a cosmic clock that dictates the flow of time. A massive blast of energy ripples out from the skyscrapers in the city center. Even the doves are caught mid-flight, hanging in the air like stone statues. People on the ground are frozen in states of pure panic as the world around them stops. The sky becomes a silent gallery of birds that can't move a single inch. Inside a plane, a passenger watches in shock as his coffee hangs suspended in midair. Joo-Heon finally catches his breath, glad that the initial chaos has ground to a halt. The world is dead silent, but the mysterious book relic is still floating among the frozen debris. Lee Seala and Julian Miller realize they're the only ones left moving in this frozen landscape. The book seems impressed that Joo-Heon found a clever way to sidestep the disaster. Joo-Heon keeps a close eye on the relic, knowing a simple time freeze won't be enough to stop it. The pages flip open, as it offers a bonus point before warning that something much worse is coming. It triggers the curse of Vishwakarma, signaling the start of the blockade of tools. A massive blue tower erupts from the ground, shattering the city streets. More towers burst out of the earth, tossing cars around like toys in the debris. Joo-Heon watches the destruction, realizing the scale of the threat is changing. Suddenly, every piece of technology starts self-destructing, starting with phones cracking in people's hands. Machines everywhere begin to shatter, leaving Lee Seala in a state of panic. Even the three-legged crow takes a hit, as her own powers spark and burn her wings. The book relic mocks them, explaining that humans only evolved because of language and tools. Now it's taking both away, neutralizing every machine and weapon on the planet. It channels the power of Vishwakarma, the legendary Indian god who built everything in existence. Control rooms across the world go dark as monitors explode and systems fail. Communication is cut off as radios spark and burn in the hands of confused soldiers. In hospitals, surgeons are left completely helpless as their equipment dies mid-operation. Even a simple surgical scalpel cracks and shatters, leaving human civilization on the brink. Joo-Heon stares at the failing tools, his mind already racing for a counterattack. He demands to know why the relics are being hit too, but the book just labels them as tools. Joo-Heon tries to use his pen, but it erupts in violent blue sparks that shock him. Gritting his teeth, he forces the pen to the paper, refusing to let his best relic break. He swings the pen with everything he's got, treating his story like a heavy weapon. Lee Seala and Ilya Volkov watch in awe as he pushes past the limits of the curse. Joo-Heon declares that records are undying blades that can cut through any obstacle. A massive pillar of light shoots into the sky, proving that memories and stories are exempt from any god's curse. Three-legged crow is struggling on the ground, demanding to know why the curse is hitting relics if it's only meant for man-made tools. The book relic just growls, clearly annoyed that its logic is being questioned by a mere spirit. It decides to make an exception for the relics, but Seo Joo-Heon is already moving on to the next problem. Ilya Volkov and Lee Seala are still stuck in the language blockade, their speech coming out as garbled code. Joo-Heon realizes they need a bridge to communicate, so he pulls out a special pair of earrings. It's Solomon's earring, an S-grade relic that lets the wearer hear the voices of all things, effectively bypassing the curse. Lee Seala is relieved when it actually works, finally able to understand what everyone is saying again. Joo-Heon doesn't waste time and orders Ilya to burn the book into nothingness. Ilya summons Phlegethos, a fiery demonic spirit who emerges in a vortex of hellfire. The massive entity unleashes a wave of heat, intending to incinerate the book and everything near it. The book relic is caught right in the center of the blaze, coughing as the flames lick at its pages. Joo-Heon is surprised that a paper book can survive a hit from a God-tier demonic relic without turning to ash. The book mocks them, challenging the team to see if they can survive the remaining 2 curses. It plans to lay a total of 4 curses on the world, curious to see how much a majesty can actually block. It explains that if they manage to stop all of them, the current world line might actually survive. Julian Miller watches the exchange, realizing the entire world is on the brink of collapse. The 3rd disaster begins, the Curse of the Nile, also known as the Blockade of Records. A massive tower of light erupts, signaling the start of a global memory wipe. The book notes that while Joo-Heon kept his relic rights last time, this curse targets something deeper. It goes after the very foundation of human knowledge and history. People watch in confusion as maps and physical documents start to dissolve into nothing. The Curse of the Nile erases records, wipes memories, and even removes the history of how to use relics. Massive towers of ancient text rise into the sky, overwriting the modern world. Even Joo-Heon starts to feel the pressure as the world's history begins to unravel. Ilya stares into space, unable to even recall his own name as the curse raids his mind. Both Ilya and Julian are succumbing to the memory wipe, losing their sense of self in the process. Joo-Heon tells Julian that only majesties are inherently built to remember the truth. He reveals that the book was a weapon used by the gods of the 4 great civilizations to wipe out entire world lines. Julian reflects on how the worlds he knew were destroyed in this exact same order. The book relic pulses with a sinister red eye, satisfied with its perfect plan for human extinction. Joo-Heon just smirks, finally seeing the pattern behind the chaos. He realizes the first curse was based on the Tower of Babel from Mesopotamian mythology. The second was the curse of Vishwakarma from Indian mythology. And the current curse of the Nile is clearly pulled from Egyptian mythology. He concludes that an Egyptian god must be behind this, hiding somewhere in the shadows. He prepares a counterattack, knowing exactly which relic will hurt the sun god Ra. He bets that Isis's relic will be the perfect foil for Ra's absolute authority. The book relic is genuinely stunned, calling Joo-Heon's tactical move a form of cheating. Joo-Heon just laughs it off, leaping forward with his weapon ready to strike. The book screams for him to stop, terrified of the Majesty's sudden counteroffensive. Joo-Heon doesn't care about the book's insults as he zeroes in on the heart of the curse. He slams his relic into the tower, shattering the Egyptian blockade in a massive explosion of light. The massive tower of the Egyptian blockade crumbles, dissolving into a storm of glowing fragments as the curse finally breaks. A system window appears, announcing that the curse of the Nile is neutralized and the blockade on human records has been lifted. Seo Joo-Heon lands steadily on the debris-strewn ground, the aura of his successful counterattack still humming around him. Julian Miller and Lee Seala stand frozen, their eyes wide as the memories of their own lives and the world's history flood back. Everywhere, the void is filled with returning knowledge, as physical books and digital data manifest back into existence. The modern world snaps back into focus, the ancient symbols of the curse fading away to reveal the city skyline once more. Kongming, the restorer, lets out a triumphant laugh, his hand steadying as he finally remembers the secrets of his craft. The oppressive atmosphere vanishes, replaced by the familiar sounds of his teammates bickering and celebrating their survival. Julian watches from a distance, his expression unreadable as he observes the man responsible for this miracle. Looking through his glasses with a renewed sense of respect, he quietly speaks the name of the man who saved them. Seo Joo-Heon stands heroically amidst the last flickering remnants of the curse, the undisputed master of his own fate.